Hey everybody, Reaper here again with yet another discussion video. Today, I want to talk a little bit about what are your biggest collecting accomplishments so far. For those of you that have not become jaded to the hobby with all the high prices and all these other little things that have been going on that may slow down your collecting of certain books. What are some of the things that you look back on or you could look at right now and you could just say to yourself, wow, this was an accomplishment for me, for whatever reason? Naturally, I'll start. Now, this is mentioned before in previous videos, right? For me, I think one of my biggest accomplishments was collecting my X-Men Silver Age run. You know, and I managed to keep them all above, not all, there's like a handful of them that are not, but mostly 5.5 and above. Like above, when I say above, like maybe to 7.5 or 7.0. I'm not talking about to 9.0 or anything like that. That's not true. But usually 5.5, 5.0. And I think that's pretty good for the age of the books. I mentioned this before in a previous video. That's a huge accomplishment for me. You know, it was really before I started getting into Spider-Man when I first started collecting, because it was like I started with X-Men, then I went to Spider-Man, and that was it. But I started with X-Men. You know, a bunch of things got me into X-Men. You know, the Marvel Masterpieces cards, the X-Men animated show, the Wolverine game that came out for Nintendo, which I still have. I don't have the box anymore, which kind of sucks. I don't know what happened to all those Nintendo boxes, because I usually am very meticulous when it comes to collecting. I still have most of my Super Nintendo boxes with the cellophane still on them. But I don't know what the hell happened to those Nintendo boxes. I think they were thrown out. Not by me. Not by me. But anyway, there was a bunch of things that got me into it. I didn't know who the X-Men were. Oh, the action figures, the Toy Biz action figures that came out. I still have those. Bunch of things got me into X-Men, and I thought that it was a really good, group of characters. And I was shocked when I found out that the X-Men have been around since the early 60s. I was like, oh, these X-Men, this probably came out like a few years ago in the 1980s. Well, back then when I was collecting in the early 90s. I knew characters like Superman, even though he's DC, and Spider-Man were probably around for decades. But the X-Men, these are probably new characters. And then I found out that they came out in 1963. I was like, what? These characters have been around since then? Interesting. And when I finally got my X-Men #1, I had a coverless copy, and the back page was ripped out too. So not only was it coverless, this is back in 1993, not only was it coverless, the back page of the first wrap was ripped off. I wound up selling that copy a few years ago. I wish I held on to it, only to sell it today. Not because of nostalgia, like, ooh, I can never get rid of this. No. I wish I held on to it for a couple more years and would have tripled my profits on it. But I got a decent amount on it. It wound up getting me an upgraded Amazing Spider-Man 14 and Strange Tales 110, albeit a 3.0 Strange Tales 110, but still good. But I would say that when I finally, collecting the finishing my 60s X-Men run, like I just mentioned to you, but probably above that, being able to get an X-Men #1 with a cover. I had 3 copies of X-Men #1 over my life. The coverless one that I mentioned, that was the very first, even though it was an absolute piece of shit. I say, why? Because it was coverless? Not just that. Because, like I said, the back page of the first wrap was ripped out. It had tape on every single page, because at the top of the book, right in the middle, there was maybe a half an inch, a little more than half an inch, no, about an inch, I think, or almost an inch, not quite an inch, tear. So the previous owner decided to put Scotch tape on every page, sealing it up. Both sides of the wrap page. So it was really like, garbage. But when I was finally able to get that I originally had a 3, when I first got it, I had a 3.0. Those of you that may remember, I had it signed by Stan Lee in 2016, and I later sold it to get my Amazing Fantasy 15, which was a good idea. But getting that first book with the cover, something that I thought I would never be able to do, was really, wonderful. For anybody that's collected, for the love of collecting, and has collected a series, collected a character or characters that they loved for so long, and being able to get that complete issue was fantastic. And like I said, I sold it. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, does it? It makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. Because then I wound up getting my next accomplishment was Amazing Fantasy 15. To have the X-Men is one thing. It's a great thing. It's an excellent thing. But to have Spider-Man's first appearance simply is amazing, right? Sorry for all the puns. And so, in the month after I got that Spider-Man, Amazing Fantasy 15, I wound up getting another copy, the same 3.0 copy of X-Men #1, and I thought it was better looking than my original covered copy. It wasn't. Those know the story about that one. It was the first covered copy, one I got in the summer of 2014. I even made a video about it, but it's no longer available on YouTube. It hasn't been available on YouTube in years. I guess it took a lot of sun damage, so that the white, those white covers are hard to get white, and it was kind of tanned. The red in the X-Men was kind of sucked out. With that latest copy that I got a few years ago, even though it's still a 3.0, the colors are so much more vibrant. It's the dark green variation. The red is very red. The white is very nice and white. So it's more appealing, but it still had some of the same defects. So, but still, it was an accomplishment. Like I said, I was so proud to get that X-Men #1. Well, I sold it to get Amazing Fantasy, yes, but I couldn't stay away from it very long. I wound up getting X-Men #1 about a month later again, because I just couldn't live without X-Men, because it was very important to me. Very important to me, just as it's important as that Amazing Fantasy. I wanted Amazing Spider-Man #1. I would like to get that one day, but it will never top the accomplishment of an Amazing Fantasy 15. Amazing Spider-Man 1 will always be second fiddle next to a good second fiddle, but always be lesser than Amazing Fantasy. So trading that X-Men #1 for that, it's pretty good. One last accomplishment I'll talk about. And again, I mentioned this in other videos, but I just wanted to get them all together on this video of finishing my Tales from the Crypt collection. I mentioned how X-Men was one of the first series that I started to collect when it came to comic books. Well, before that, a few years before that, I was collecting those Tales from the Crypt Gladstone reprints. I was watching the HBO show. I watched the HBO show the night it premiered in '89. I liked horror. I saw this preview and I was like, oh wow, I gotta watch it. I watched it and I loved it. I thought it was great. And I watched the rest of the season. It was only 6 episodes. And then I remember they were showing previews, HBO was showing previews for the second season, where they were going to start having Hollywood actors as guest stars, to get people interested in the show. And I remember seeing they were having Demi Moore, and that's going to be in one of the episodes, which turned out to be the first episode of the second season. And so many others that had cameos or full-blown starring roles in some of those episodes. It was great. And to be able to get the original run, because I got the Cochrane runs early on, but be able to get the real books from the 50s, all of them, accomplishment I did in 2021. This is wonderful. It's just amazing. It's great because I'm close to finishing my Vault of Horror collection. As of the filming of this video, I need 4 more Vault of Horror books, and then I'm done with that. I still need about 9 or 10 Haunt of Fears. That sounds like a lot, and I have a lot. I have a lot of Haunt of Fears. I have mostly all the really, really difficult ones. So when I finish that, that's going to be another accomplishment. And there are other things I'm working on. Like I want to finish my, like I said, Amazing Spider-Man run, which I think I will one day, and finish my Fantastic Four run. which I will one day, because some of the harder books I've already gotten, except for the Amazing Spider-Man 1. But they're all accomplishments. They're all wonderful accomplishments. And how I know they're accomplishments is because just the other day, I went through the small box I have with all the X-Men from the 1960s. And I'm looking at issue after issue, and I'm like, wow, this is so cool that I have all these. And they're in such great shape. They're in such great shape. And it's just to have them in very presentable, not ratty condition in it itself is an accomplishment, right? So those are definitely some of the biggest accomplishments I was able to make thus far in this hobby. So what about you? What are some of your accomplishments when it comes to this hobby? What are some of your accomplishments that you were able to make thus far in your collecting? I would be very interested in knowing. Take care.